Hi there, Graham Keith here from The Great Wake Up, and welcome to today's audio. Now in today's audio, what I wanted to do is talk about what I believe is probably the most profound spiritual work we can do as an individual, for ourselves, by ourselves. And what is that work? Well, there's so many areas or avenues on this spiral of spirituality and healing and growth into our highest self. But what does all that mean? What does all that mean essentially in a nutshell? Well, we must go back to the start in order for this to make sense. And obviously, in a nutshell, when we were born, we were perfect in every sense. We had no mind, we had no beliefs, no thoughts, no limits, no doubts, but we did have loads of labels put on us when we grew up, and we did have lots of different experiences in our lives that sort of wilted our leaves, if that makes sense. Now obviously we come into the world not having an identity, and we are raised by our family, our friends, our caregivers, in our social circles, our schooling, our environments, the beliefs we take on. And based upon all this, we go from quite literally being an unlimited sponge to a sponge that's soaked up a lot of water that is weighing it down. And this is the journey of life for all of us on this journey called life. We spend the first half of our life forgetting who we are, and the second part of our life remembering who we are. And this is the beautiful point that I am on in my journey, and you may well be on in yours. But it's not the big things, or not just the big things, that we have lost ourselves from. We could have lost ourselves when we were sat in the front room with our family as a child, and you bumped your head and you started to cry, and your sister said, "Don't cry so loud, Graham." Then you will, internalise that, take it on, and suppress yourself and your authenticity, your spontaneity. This is the fundamental key of unlearning the shadow side of yourself, all of those parts that you suppressed, whether deliberately or undeliberately, or consciously or unconsciously. Parts of us were buried, parts of our authentic self were buried, were hidden, were dug down deep into the foundations, never to be relifted and looked at again. But it is all those little parts of us that make us authentic, and it is all those little parts of us that show up in our lives as, problems, frustrations, anger, unwanted behaviour that we don't even want to do. All voices from our soul screaming out to acknowledge the parts of us that we have buried for our own protection on our journey. Protection, conformity, fitting in with family, society, friends, schooling, social parts of life. All of those things require us to dilute part of ourselves. And it's this inauthenticity which, the longer we leave it, just like a mirror, the more reflective and vocal it becomes in our experience. And what a beautiful thing it is, not when we're going through the mill and going through the torrent and torment and torrid times, that our unhealed, unworked with parts of our shadow come back and bite us on the bottom. But they do that for an amazing reason. I've just recently had an episode of an unwanted meltdown or an unwanted breakdown of sorts, and I didn't realise why. But in universal time, the universe delivers the message, everything makes sense, the dots line up, and you realise, wow, that breakdown wasn't actually a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. And I was just identifying the breakthrough with a breakdown. Because why? Because the shadow self is socially conformed to hide our true emotions, our true feelings, our true thoughts, etc., etc. And when we're on a journey of manifesting our highest self, then we may often suppress the suppressed so that we don't have to deal with it. But you can't kid the universe, and the universe knows this. The universe won't deliver anything to us when we are not delving deep into the authenticity and profoundness of our authentic self. And being our authentic self is true liberation. Because you can't replace, or no money in the world could replace, the spontaneous, authentic feeling of who you really are. An unguarded, unprotected version of you. And that on my journey has been screaming out since my childhood years when I suffered some abuse. Now this abuse, being a disabled, quadriplegic, cerebral palsy-laden child, really was too much to bear. Far, far too much to bear. I already had enough going on. I didn't need to be sexually abused at the same time. But it was the greatest gift I've ever had. Because it's actually, well, it's not the greatest gift. It's there's many great gifts on this journey. But it's the moment where we realise the profoundness of those gifts that makes us say, yeah, it's the greatest gift, because it really feels like it. At the time, when I was going through that, I noticed the change, but I was lying to myself to project out a fake avatar identity, a pretend persona, to cover up the shame, to cover up the guilt, to cover up what happened to me. And, looking back, if I knew I was faking it, and everybody else must have known I was faking it. But the abuse situation was left undealt with, and it ravaged me in my life in various times. When things went wrong, all those feelings came up, added to the torment, if you like. But I want to get through the importance of being spontaneously, authentically you. I know for a fact, I'll tell you this for a fact, because I know that I do it. I used to put on a different voice when I was little, like a more deepened, raw, husky voice, like that. Why? Because I felt I had my manhood stolen for abuse. And this is why I did that. So I could feel like a man again after what happened to me. And essentially that is the whole fundamental thing of burying your true self and covering it over with a persona, avatar identity, which essentially we run through this whole world as a persona. Look at our identification documents. They're a persona. So the persona is a required element of this journey. Like I said at the start of this audio, we must firstly come into this world and forget who we are. We then create the persona identity and live through the persona identity until the day comes where the soul is gnawing us and nagging us and nudging us and winking at us, and we're getting messages and signals and pain and unwanted circumstances and problems, and all of these things are coming from the soul stroke shadow self in order to be brought to the surface and healed. And I may be only 47 at the time of recording this audio, but it has been said that I'm a highly evolved soul of many more years than my years. And it would appear to me that, being born the way I was born, everything occurred the way it's occurred, it cannot be anything else other than a pre-orchestrated divine journey, a divine plan. Everything. It's just a magical experience when we raise our awareness and consciousness to see the truth of our lives. We are not this meat suit. We are not just this body. We are not just... Everything fundamentally on our journey is an orchestration of the universe, and it is a fantastic, beautiful, mind-blowing, there are no words for it, gift when we can truly see. And in order for us to truly live in that energy, all we must do is come home to our true authentic self, the one behind the persona, the one behind the mask, the one behind the protection mechanisms, the one behind the check-in before we laugh to see if it's okay, or checking to laugh to see if we'll fit in, or checking if we can tell that joke before we just spontaneously tell it. No, you must be spontaneously, authentically you. Spontaneously, authentically you. And for me, that is beautiful. I'm just going to shift into that, guy. And the reason I say that is because this is the whole gig. This is the whole thing you need to do for you. And this is the whole thing I've needed to do for me. I am not my abuse. I am not affected by my abuse. My abuse was a necessary part of my journey for my growth. And obviously, as a result of that growth, I have achieved my wildest dreams, because everything is divinely orchestrated and preordained as part of an orchestrated divine plan, a script for our life written before we were born. And all we must do is be authentically us. Be authentically us on this world called life, because none of us are truly living. We're just existing in a personam. We're just existing in a Monopoly board token identity, if you like. We're just existing in this cardboard cutout version of who we are, the personam, the persona, the avatar, the image, the ego, whatever you want to call it, the false self. It doesn't really matter. So that is the power of the work we must do. Phenomenal spiritual work, with ultimately the highest reward of authenticity, happiness, peace, and the abundance of who you are at the end of it. Thank you for listening. I've been Graham from The Great Wake Up. Please like, share, comment and subscribe to the channel. You know we always appreciate that. And we'll see you on the next video.